I have had what I believe to be the most remarkable day in my life. And while the events are still fresh in my mind, I wish to put them down on paper as clearly as possible. Let me say this at the beginning that my name is James Clarence Withencroft. I am 30 years old, in perfect health, never having known a day's illness. By profession, I am an artist, not a very successful one, but I earn enough money by my black and white work to satisfy my necessary wants. My only near relative, a sister, died 5 years ago, so I am independent. I had breakfast this morning at 9, and after glancing through the morning paper, I lighted my pipe and proceeded to let my mind wander in the hope that I might chance upon some subject for my pencil. The room, though the door and windows were open, was oppressively hot, and I had just made up my mind that the coolest and most comfortable place in the neighborhood would be the deep end of the public swimming bath. When the idea came, I began to draw. So intent was I on my work that I left my lunch untouched, only stopping work when the clock of St. Jude's struck 4. The final result for a hurried sketch was, I felt, the best thing I had done. It showed a criminal in the dock immediately after the judge had pronounced sentence. The man was enormous. He stood in the dock with his short, clumsy fingers clasping the rail, looking straight in front of him. The feeling that his expression conveyed was not so much one of horror as of utter, absolute collapse. There seemed nothing in the man strong enough to sustain the mountain of flesh. I rolled up the sketch and, without quite knowing why, placed it in my pocket. Then, with the rare sense of happiness which the knowledge of a good thing well done gives, I left the house. I believe that I set out with the idea of calling upon Trenton, for I remember walking along Lytton Street and turning to the right along Gilchrist Road at the bottom of the hill where the men were at work on the new tram lines. From there onwards, I have only the vaguest recollection of where I went. The one thing of which I was fully conscious of was the awful heat. I longed for the thunder promised by the great banks of copper-colored cloud that hung low over the western sky. I must have walked 5 or 6 miles when a small boy snapped me out of my daydream by asking the time. It was 20 minutes to 7. When he left me, I began to take stock of my bearings. I found myself standing before a gate that led into a yard where there were flowers, purple stock, and scarlet geranium. Above the entrance was a board with the inscription, C.H.S. Atkinson, Monumental Mason, Worker in English and Italian marbles. From the yard itself came a cheery whistle, the noise of hammer blows, and the cold sound of steel meeting stone. A sudden impulse made me enter. A man was sitting with his back towards me, busy at work on a slab of curiously veined marble. He turned round as he heard my steps, and I stopped short. It was the man I had been drawing, whose portrait lay in my pocket. He sat there, huge and elephantine, the sweat pouring from his scalp, which he wiped with a red silk handkerchief. But though the face was the same, the expression was absolutely different. He greeted me smiling, as if we were old friends, and shook my hand. I apologized for my intrusion. Everything is hot and glary outside, I said. This looked like an oasis in the desert.
I don't know about the oasis, but it certainly is hot. It's hot as hell. Take a seat, sir.
He pointed to the end of the gravestone on which he was at work, and I sat down. That's a beautiful piece of stone you've got a hold of. He shook his head.
No way it is. Surface here is as fine as anything you could wish. There's a big flaw at the back, though I don't expect you'd ever notice it. I could never really make a good job of a bit of marble like that. Be alright in the summer like this. Wouldn't mind the blasted heat. But wait till the winter comes. There's nothing quite like frost to find out the weak points in stone.
Then what's it for?
You'd hardly believe me if I was to tell you it's for an exhibition, but it's the truth. Artists have exhibitions, so do grocers and butchers. We have them too. All the latest little things and headstones, you know.
He went on to talk of marbles, which sort best withstood wind and rain, and which were easiest to work, then of his garden, and a new sort of carnation he had bought. At the end of every other minute, he would drop his tools, wipe his shining head, and curse the heat. I said little. I felt uneasy. There was something unnatural, uncanny in meeting this man. I tried at first to persuade myself that I had seen him before, that his face, unknown to me, had found a place in some out-of-the-way corner of my memory, but I knew that I was practicing little more than a plausible piece of self-deception. Mr. Atkinson finished his work, spat on the ground, and got up with a sigh of relief.
What do you think of that?
He said, with an air of evident pride. The inscription which I read for the first time was this: "Sacred to the memory of James Clarence Withenscroft, born January 18th, 1870. He passed away very suddenly on August 20th, 1900. In the midst of life, we are in death." For some time, I sat in silence. Then a cold shudder ran down my spine. I asked him where he had seen that name.
No, I didn't see it anywhere. I wanted some name and I put down the first thing came into my head. What do you want to know?
It's a strange coincidence, but it happens to be mine.
And the dates?
I can only answer for one of them, and it's correct.
Now peculiar.
But he knew less than I did. I told him of my morning's work. I took the sketch out of my pocket and showed it to him. As he looked, the expression of his face altered until it became more and more like that of the man I had drawn.
And it was only day before yesterday. I told Maria there was no such thing as ghosts.
Neither of us had seen a ghost, but I knew what he meant. You probably heard my name.
And you must have seen me somewhere and have forgotten it. You collected on last July.
I had never been to Clacton in my life. We were silent for some time. We were both looking at the same thing. The two dates on the gravestone, and one was right.
Come inside and have some supper,
said Mr. Atkinson. His wife was a cheerful woman with flaky red cheeks. Her husband introduced me as a friend of his who was an artist. The result was unfortunate, for after the sardines and watercress had been removed, she brought out a Dore Bible, and I had to sit and express my admiration for nearly half an hour. I went outside and found Atkinson sitting on the gravestone, smoking. We resumed the conversation at the point we had left off. "You must excuse my asking," I said, "but do you know of anything you've done for which you could be put on trial?" He shook his head.
I'm not a bankrupt. Business is prosperous enough. 3 years ago, I gave turkeys to some of the guardians at Christmas, and that's all I can think of. And they were small ones, too.
He added as an afterthought. He got up, fetched a can from the porch, and began to water the flowers.
Twice a day, regularly in the hot weather. And then the heat sometimes gets the better of the delicate ones. And fans, good lord, they could never stand it. Where do you live?
I told him my address. It would take an hour's walk to get back home.
It's like this. We'll look at the matter straight. If you go home tonight, you take your chances of accidents. Cop may run you over. There's always banana skins and orange peels, to say nothing of fallen ladders.
He spoke of the improbable with an intense seriousness that would have been laughable 6 hours before, but I did not laugh.
The best thing we can do is for you to stay here till 12 o'clock. We'll go upstairs and smoke. Maybe cooler inside.
To my surprise, I agreed. We are sitting now in a long, low room beneath the eaves. Atkinson has sent his wife to bed. He himself is busy sharpening some tools at a little oil stone, smoking one of my cigars the while. The air seems charged with thunder. I am writing this at a shaky table before the open window. The leg is cracked, and Atkinson, who seems a handyman with his tools, is going to mend it as soon as he is finished putting an edge on his chisel. It is after 11 now. I shall be gone in less than an hour. But the heat is stifling. It is enough to send a man mad.